Welcome to the podcast, Leslie.
Oh, Jennifer, I'm so excited to be here. I've been excited all day watching the clock and thinking, is it time yet? Is it time yet?
That's so funny. I've looked at the clock multiple times today too. Like, I'm ready because I want to learn all about You Can't Eat Love and so many other things that you are offering. Because like you, I've been cyber stalking you a little bit in a good way. But I want to start with my favorite question. In this moment in time in your life, what is that thing that's lighting you up the most?
Right now, today, and I don't mean this 24-hour day, what's lighting me up is knowing that my words are impacting people and they are beginning to see that there is a different way to look at themselves. And the feedback that I get from readers telling me how they are learning to love themselves and how they didn't think that they would be able to do that. And also how they are starting to fill what I call the myself-sized hole in their heart with love instead of filling it with food. And that just absolutely lights me up, because when I wrote the book, which is entitled You Can't Eat Love, when I wrote the book, I was writing it. Well, actually, the book wrote itself. I mean, that sounds crazy, but the book wrote itself. And I realized I was writing it for me that I used to be, and that there were other me's out there that needed to hear that they are enough and they're not missing anything. They're not broken. And so to get the feedback from the readers is just so heartwarming. I mean, it gives me goosebumps and tears and everything each time I get the feedback.
Oh, I love that. And I know you probably have a story that got you here, because you said that the book just wrote yourself. Like, what was that past version of yourself that you were writing for?
Well, about 6, almost 7 years ago, I hit a point in my life where I could either continue on one path or go down another path. And I was heading in a very, very dark direction. And I made a decision. In fact, I guess I need to take a picture of it and post it somewhere. But I have an actual stake in the ground. And I talk about this in the book. I actually drove a stake in the ground, and my husband put the date on the stake when I did it. And the reason that I did that was I decided that I was no longer going to be who I was. I was going to start being healthy mentally, physically, and emotionally. And what that meant was I started cleaning up the garbage that was inside my head. And I tell people, if looking back, if I would have known how hard the work was going to be, I don't know that I would have started. But I am beyond grateful that I did start. And I try to encourage other people, it's a journey. Let's break it down. Take one step. Let's celebrate. Let's take another step. Let's celebrate. Let's just keep going and don't look at the destination. Focus on the journey, not the destination. And that really applies to any major changes that we're making in our life.
Yeah, I mean, like, whoa, like, I hope everybody heard that. Like, focus on each step and celebrate. I think that's a huge part that we often forget, is like that one, even if it's a baby step forward, is a celebration.
Yes, because one of the things that I learned is, the habits, the self-talk, the tapes that are running in our head. We even have these hamsters that are on wheels that start spinning that wheel, and it's not going anywhere, and it's not very helpful. All of that is learned behavior. And we learned it over a period of time. Plus, we have all those voices of other people, those not so helpful voices of other people inside of our heads. And those have been there for a period of time, depending upon how many years you've been walking on the face of this earth. Those voices are more ingrained than if they've been around, just a very short period of time. So one of the things I started recognizing is if I'm going to be changing the voices, if I'm going to be changing the habits, if I'm going to be making all these changes over something that I've been doing for more than half of a century, I needed to do something to help me continue on, to take the next step. So I started celebrating every little tiny thing. And what I started realizing is our brain likes to be happy. And it doesn't make any difference what it's doing. If it feels good, quote unquote, it wants more. I mean, and we can go one of two ways. I mean, think about the kid who acts up in class. What are they looking for? What's their payoff? Their payoff is attention, right? Now it's going to be negative attention, but it's still attention. So their brain is looking for that hit. It's looking for that affirmation. Okay, if I do this, I'm going to get this. This is my payoff. So I started looking at, okay, what is my payoff? So I celebrated the things that I was accomplishing. I celebrated the things that I wanted to do again. And here's a big secret. I ignored the stuff that I did not want to repeat. So let's say, for example, I mean, one of the things that I did was I lost almost 100 pounds. Okay. Well, in doing that, there are days when, you eat a whole bag of potato chips and onion dip. It happens. It's called life. Instead of beating myself up over the fact that I ate an entire bag of barbecue potato chips and an entire container of onion dip, I would say, you know what? I don't know what was going on. We'll figure it out, but I'm going to forgive myself and I'm going to move on. And I just left it and didn't keep circling back to it.
Ooh, and I think that's a super, I mean, for me, just that's like one of those like mic drop moments, like, okay, we can be done, because that circling back, that's what so many of us do, because we get in that pattern and our poor brains are like, you're telling me this, but you're wanting this.
Right, exactly. And our brain is, first of all, our brain is very powerful, but it's also very easy to trick. And we can tell our brain all kinds of stories and it will believe it. So I started realizing that. And I started looking at, what is my payoff? How am I paying my brain for this? And the best thing that I could do to help myself feel better, to give myself love and to show myself kindness, was to forgive myself for the times that I messed up. Instead of beating myself up and saying, oh my gosh, how stupid can you be? You really don't want to do this. You've messed up again. You're never going to, I don't need to tell you the story because you already know the story. We all know the story. My point is, I quit telling myself that story. I said, something, this is what happened. What was really going on? What were you really thinking? What were you really feeling? And I forgave myself for the behavior, because the behavior was behavior. And so many times, especially for me, food was my drug of choice. And it was what I ran to so that I didn't have to feel the pain of feeling. And I did not know how to feel because I hadn't been taught how to feel, which I can go off on a whole different path with. I've been told, and how many times have you heard this? You shouldn't feel fill in the blank.
So many times. I think that's ingrained in us since we're like 4, 5.
Probably younger than that. You fall down, you hurt yourself. Oh, that didn't hurt. You shouldn't cry. And the truth of the matter is that sets up some cognitive dissonance. This is how I feel, but you're telling me I shouldn't feel this way. Well, wait a minute. So then, then we wonder, why is it we start seeking something to stop that confusion, to stop that pain? And like I said, for me, my drug of choice was food. And I had this huge realization that also you can say, people will often say, so-and-so made me such and such, or you are making me such and such. Forget that one. Throw it out the window. No one can make you anything except reservations for dinner. It's a choice. You know, you choose to feel sad right now as a consequence of whatever happened. You choose to feel happy as a consequence of whatever happened. Take back your power. Take back your power. Don't give it away. No one can make you anything except reservations for dinner.
Ooh, I love that. That's going to be on a quote graphic everywhere, I think. It's like, you can only, I mean, it is a choice. And that's something that I really believe, like, wholeheartedly, something that we should be taught as, I mean, I hate the shoulds of the world, but that's something we should be taught, is that we have that power of choice. So in this process of going from like the old version of you that you wrote this book for to like now, what does that relationship look like a little bit differently, like with yourself?
Well, I'm much kinder to myself. And among the things that I learned is, if I'm going to truly love myself, which, you know, is what you preach, you know, self-love, that's what you preach. If I'm going to truly love myself and express self-love, I am first, which is not taught or encouraged in our society, especially for females. We're taught that we need to be second, last, you know, anything but first. And I use the illustration because I talk in stories all the time, but I use the illustration of your oxygen mask. If you're flying on an airplane, you know, the first thing they tell you before you ever back the plane up or anything, they give you the whole story about the life jacket and the seatbelt and the oxygen mask. And I used to sleep through it and get really annoyed because, you know, it was interrupting my movie or my book or whatever I was doing other than paying attention to what they were saying. And I could almost do it as well as they could. But I saw a YouTube one day, and it said, you have 30 seconds. So let's pretend you're on a plane. The plane loses pressure. You're busy putting everybody else's oxygen mask on. And what's going to happen to you? You're going to be laid out in the aisle. That plane is going to land. Those people are going to step over you and say, oh, there's that nice person. On occasion, they're going to think about you. But where are you going to be? Where are you going to be? So truthfully, and this was one of the things that I came to the harsh realization of. I had to take care of me first. And then I finally understood, we teach other people how to treat us. And we teach us how to treat us.
Oh.
So we need to observe, and I had to start observing, how am I treating myself? Because, you know, the expression, actions speak louder than words. The world can see how you treat yourself. So the world thinks it's okay to treat you in that fashion. And when you start expressing expectations that are different from the way you're treating yourself, that's when people start going, wait a minute, hold on, what are you talking about? And then, you know, they get confused, and then they continue treating you the way you were treating you, and you get really, really angry. Well, why aren't they treating me better? Well, the truth of the matter is, it's because of how you were treating yourself, and you are teaching them how to treat you.
Oh, that one's a hard hitter.
Isn't it though?
It's really, I mean, it does start within, just like part of the message of this podcast is it's all self-love. It's all part of being accepting of yourself. And I think that, I don't know, like what you just said, it's hard to hear and inspiring and empowering to hear, because we do have these places where we're like people pleasers. Women, I mean, like you mentioned, we want to help everyone first, and we leave ourselves so empty. And that's why I want to know more about your book and all of your books, including, I saw that you have another one coming out, you mentioned. And I want to know more about how you are putting this message out into the world and creating your own, what I call a tsunami of self-love through this You Can't Eat Love.
Well, I reach out to people all the time. I've got, the Facebook group so that people post, I post, and that kind of thing. And I'm trying to get people to connect, because it's through connections that we can lift each other up. Because if you are out there by yourself trying to do something that's going totally against the grain, well, you need some kind of support. So I've got the Facebook group, which is You Can't Eat Love, where, different things are posted and that kind of stuff. And then I talk as often as I can, because, the easiest way to get my message out in my voice is for me to share it with people. And yes, I'd love, love, love the visual of a tsunami of self-love. Because so many times, it's other feelings that pick us up in a tsunami and slam us to the bottom of the ocean floor. Well, when I heard you first say, the first time I listened to your podcast a couple of days back, first time I heard you with that expression, I was like, wow, I never imagined that I could ride the crest of that tsunami. And that visual was so incredible, because how powerful is that to be on the crest of a tsunami? Because what I had used a tsunami in the past for was to describe grief, deep grief, how it can be, you can get caught up in a tsunami and you just get slammed to the floor of the Marianas Trenches. And you don't know if you can come up and take a breath. So I had to start rethinking, or actually add to my thoughts, the visual that you present. So I encourage other people, read the book. You can hear, if you've heard me speak, when you read the book, you can hear me speaking to you, because I worked really, really hard to make sure I kept my voice. And I talk in stories and I talk crazy, but that's what I'm doing.
I love that. And I'll make sure to get all of your information, including your Facebook group, in the show notes so that people can get in. Because I think,
thank you so much.
what you're creating is part of this tsunami that I'm trying to create. And I love that, like, how you explained it, because I've been trying to explain it for 2 years now. And I'm like, I just feel like it's sweeping over everything. And it's just this love blanket that's coming in.
Well, to me, a tsunami sucks up all the water and all the power, and it builds and it builds and it builds to this really massive, massive wall of water. And then it's just transformational, absolutely transformational. So, like I said, the first time I heard your expression, I mean, I had to pause the podcast because I was just so blown away by the visual of how powerful I was riding this tsunami of self-love.
Yeah, it feels just so good. So I want to know a little bit more about, your journey with, again, where you're feeding yourself, not for, what's the words that I want to use? I've just totally lost my words, but, we're real life here. But that changing those emotional eating patterns to really actually feeding your body with love.
Well, the first thing that I had to do is I had to learn how to name the emotions that I was feeling. That was number one. Then the second thing I had to learn to do was to not be afraid to feel, which meant as soon as I started feeling sad, I didn't try and run from it. If it meant that I sat, well, then I sat. What I did that was most effective for me, and I still do it, is I grab pen and paper and I start writing, because I can have a conversation with myself with pen and paper. And I find that to be far, far, far more helpful than a conversation that just runs around in my head. because my objective, my mission in life is to fire the hamsters on the wheels, send them back to the pet store, and put the pet store out of business. So by being able to have a conversation with myself on pen and paper, it helped me to clarify what I was feeling. It allowed me the opportunity to really express it honestly. Because there are times, I mean, okay, I'm human, right? I can get really, really angry. I can get really, really sad. I can also be really, really happy. And let's face it, not everybody wants to hear everything that you were doing. Okay. I mean, that's a hard truth. And these days, with people, being in isolation and shut down and all this kind of stuff, it's even more difficult. But truthfully, somebody doesn't want to sit there and listen to you go on and on and on for hour on end. Okay, they get tired. Not only that, but they get their own stuff, right? And are you really willing to reciprocate that much time? Okay. I mean, how many times have you had a friend where that friend is constantly telling you all their stuff that's going on, and then you start telling them your stuff and they got someplace to go? Okay. Well, guess who never has someplace to go? Your very best friend in the whole wide world. And that's you. So part of what I talk about in the book is introducing the reader, the people, to their very best friend in the whole wide world, so that they begin to understand, just like I did. I'm always willing to listen to me. I don't care how crazy it sounds. In fact, I was laughing at myself one day about 2 months ago. I was having some really, if somebody were to read the stuff that I wrote, it was some of those crazy thoughts that, somebody would be calling the loony bin or the police or something. And I was reluctant to write it. And I was like, wait a minute. Who are you trying to fool? Who are you lying to? And so I went ahead and wrote, the thoughts that I had and got them out. Because if I'm going to live my best life, and if I'm going to stop using my drug of choice, I need to be honest with myself, no matter how ugly it is. Now, I do not journal. Don't tell me I journal. I just have stacks and stacks of notebooks where I've written stuff, but I don't journal.
Awesome.
And I have them, and I was looking at them and I said, do I want to leave these laying around for when I'm gone and my boys here are cleaning up all the stuff? I said, I think that I will keep them. And if they choose to read them, they can choose to read them. And if they choose not to read them, they can choose not to read them. I typically do not reread what I write, simply because I want it to be a one and done conversation.
Oh, I love that. One and done, and move forward and rise. So I want to know, while you're finding emotions, what was your favorite emotion that you found that you had maybe repressed?
Joy and happiness, because I struggled with that one. I didn't really know how to be happy or how to feel happy. I felt like I didn't deserve to feel happy. I'm the oldest of 6 kids, so oftentimes I was the one who was in charge and responsible. Well, responsible people are not happy people. So to learn that it's okay to laugh, with wild abandon, that's the one that I've really enjoyed. The one that has been the most helpful is sadness, being able to just feel sad because that's how I feel.
Ooh. I am my mind is just, there's going so many different directions, and you just brought up something that I hear so often from so many people, is that we don't know how to be happy. We don't know how to have that joy and that play and all that fun. You mentioned boys the other, a few minutes ago in the conversation, that watching kids brings us. And I mean, they just have so much joy before we take it all away.
Exactly. And, our emotions are things that we learn. We learn by observing the people around us, just like everything else. So, when we repress the emotions, because we've been told you shouldn't feel XYZ, when you go on the journey to love yourself and to really embrace everything about you, well, you've got to learn how to feel. And it can be scary, it can be terrifying. And what I discovered was a lot of what kept coming up was that should. And I say in the book, let's just throw the word out. I'm got a fictional petition to remove it from the dictionary, because should carries with it the heavy weight of shame. Because should does not travel alone. It travels with shame. Should is rules and regulations. It's not fun. It's not light. It's not airy. So that's why I'm on this huge mission, let's not should all over ourselves, enter the no should zone. But as we learn to love ourselves, we must learn to love every piece, every part, every feeling, everything of ourselves, and not allow that should conversation to come into play.
Yes. I'm like standing over here, hands up. Yes. Yes. Amen. Like, no more should. I will sign your petition many times as I'm allowed.
It's just not a helpful word. It really is not a helpful word.
No. And I never associated with it with shame and how much heavy and how much it steals our joy.
Right. Because as soon as someone says to you, well, you should have done XYZ, then what happens? What's the conversation that goes off in your head?
I'm not doing enough. I'm not worthy. I'm doing it wrong. I'm too fat. There's a whole bunch of things that goes with should.
Exactly. And are any of those thoughts helpful?
Oh, no.
No, not at all. And I try to encourage people, instead of saying I should do XYZ, you know what? I'm making a choice. I choose to do whatever. I'm making a choice. Or I choose not to do whatever. Because, it's so important that we take back our power. So when we allow people to should on us, we give our power away. When we allow people to tell us how we should and should not be feeling, we are giving away our power. And one of the things that I started looking at is how many times a day in my life was I giving away my power. And so part of the journey was understanding I needed to keep my power. I needed to keep my power. And a lot of that started with the words that I spoke to myself and, out loud and in my head. And some of the things that I changed were, I don't say cheat, because you can only cheat 3 ways: taxes, tests, and your significant other. You can't cheat on no other way can you cheat. Choice. They're either good choices, great choices, or not so good choices. See, there are no bad choices.
I love it.
So, but each one of those things is helping us to take back our power. And the more power we take back, the more we are telling ourselves that we love and we care and we cherish ourselves, instead of being kind of a doll or, an actor in a play. We are authentically living our life.
Ooh. Authentically living our lives as ourselves, taking back our power. I feel like it's just owning and forgiving. And I don't know. I just feel like I should give myself a big old hug.
Well, you should.
I'm like, just got to give us a big hug.
Yes. And yes, I did say should, because you should give yourself a big hug. Yeah, you can choose to give yourself a big hug. And you know what? Yourself would probably love that big hug.
Right. And all the emotions.
Yeah.
I just, there's so much here that you've offered and brought to the table. And I just love how you're helping people change their relationship with themselves and with food, because it's they're important. That's like the most important things that you can change your relationship with on this planet.
Right. And understanding that you are enough just as you are. You are perfect just as you are. And if you're struggling, okay, let's figure it out. Let's figure out what is going on that you're struggling. And it's okay if you're struggling, because think about, the last time you mastered a task, somebody who's playing the clarinet or a flute or, any of those instruments, not so much the drums, but, any of those instruments. Think about all the squeaking and the squawking and the bad notes that happen. It doesn't, you don't become a Carnegie Hall soloist in a day or a year. And where you are, you didn't get there in a day. So I'm going to tell you a secret. It's going to take you probably half the time to get someplace else that it took you to get to where you were, because we've got to rewrite the scripts. We've got to redo the habits. We've got to relearn some things. And it doesn't happen overnight. And then, just like so many other things, we slip back. Why? Because the old habits never go away. They're always waiting for an opportunity to come back out. And that's okay too. We forgive ourselves, we pick ourselves up, we dust ourselves off, and we go on.
Oh.
Moving forward, one step, one celebration at a time.
One step, one celebration, and they're always hiding.
Yep.
Holy smokes. Mind blown. I love it. I don't know. I can just feel the love like pouring out of you and what you're giving to this community. So I am so grateful that you have taken this time to be with us on this podcast. I want to ask you one of my favorite final questions, which is, if somebody walked away with just that like one little nugget that they took with them for the rest of their life, what would that be?
That they are enough, just as they are. They are not broken. There's nothing wrong with them. And if they don't believe that they are enough, I will believe it for them until they are able to